Racist farmer returns from death with a terrifying message from Jesus. In a shocking tale of redemption, transformation, and a glimpse into the divine plan, a once racist farmer has returned from death with a chilling message from Jesus himself. What he saw and heard will challenge everything you think you know about the world, the future, and humanity's purpose. From revelations about technology and society to direct messages about Elon Musk's role in shaping our future, this is a story you cannot afford to miss. The farmer had lived a life defined by narrow perspectives and deeply ingrained hatred. Born and raised in a small rural community, his world was insular, his beliefs shaped by generational prejudices that ran through his family like an unbroken chain. He viewed the world through a lens of us versus them, clinging to the outdated notions passed down from his father and grandfather. To him, life was simple. There were people who belonged and people who didn't. Those who didn't belong were to be distrusted, avoided, or outright despised. His farm was his fortress. Acres of land stretched in every direction, shielding him from the broader world he refused to engage with. He had little use for the outside world, dismissing anything unfamiliar as a threat to his way of life. Visitors to the farm were rare, and when they did come, they were met with cold suspicion. If they were different in any way, whether by race, background, or beliefs, his hostility became palpable. Over the years, this hostility grew into a toxic bitterness that infected every part of his life. Neighbors whispered about him, calling him the angry old farmer. But he wore this reputation like a badge of honor. "The world's gone soft," he'd mutter to himself, scowling at news reports or stories from passing travelers. He saw his bigotry as a form of strength, a way to preserve what he saw as the purity of his traditions. He had no time for the complexities of a changing world. His relationships with others suffered. Estranged from his family, he lived alone, pushing away anyone who tried to get close. The few workers who had been willing to help on his farm quit after enduring his tirades. His life became increasingly isolated, a self-imposed exile that deepened his resentment. He scoffed at ideas of love, acceptance, and forgiveness, dismissing them as naive fantasies. Then came the day that changed everything. It began like any other. The sun rose over the rolling fields, and the farmer, now in his 60s, went about his routine of tending to his crops and animals. But there was an unease in the air, a feeling he couldn't quite shake. He had been having trouble with his tractor, a piece of machinery as old and stubborn as he was, and decided to spend the morning fixing it. The engine had been sputtering for weeks, and he was determined to solve the problem without anyone's help. As he worked, his frustration grew. The bolts were stuck, the grease was thick, and the heat of the day bore down on him like a relentless weight. Sweat dripped from his brow as he cursed under his breath. He tugged at a wrench with all his might, but suddenly the machine lurched forward, pinning him beneath its weight. The pain was instant and unbearable. He struggled to free himself, but the more he moved, the worse it became. His breath came in short, panicked gasps as he realized the severity of the situation. The farm was remote, and there was no one nearby to hear his cries for help. The crushing weight of the tractor pressed against his chest, and with each passing moment, his strength ebbed away. As his vision blurred, memories began to flood his mind. Not the joyful memories that people often recall in their final moments, but a lifetime of bitterness and regret. He thought of the family members he had pushed away, the friendships he had destroyed, the opportunities for love and connection that he had squandered. He felt the weight of his choices as heavily as the tractor pressing down on him. And then everything went dark. For what felt like an eternity, there was nothing but silence and an endless void. He was no longer aware of the pain or his surroundings. He felt as if he were floating in an abyss, untethered from time and space. Panic gave way to a strange sense of calm, and then to a realization. He was dead. The thought was both terrifying and oddly liberating. There was no escape, no turning back. His life, as he had known it, was over. It was in this state of suspension that he began to feel a presence. It started as a faint light in the distance, growing brighter and warmer as it approached. The light was unlike anything he had ever seen, blindingly brilliant yet soothing, as though it were made of pure love. As it enveloped him, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace, the likes of which he had never experienced in his life. And then he saw him. Standing in the midst of the light was a figure he instinctively knew to be Jesus. There were no dramatic fanfares, no booming voices from the heavens, just a quiet, radiant presence that carried an unshakable authority. The farmer was frozen, unable to speak or move as the weight of his life's choices pressed down on him. Before Jesus even spoke, the farmer's entire life flashed before his eyes. Every hateful word, every selfish action, every opportunity to show kindness that he had ignored, it all played out like a vivid movie. He saw the pain he had caused others, the bridges he had burned, and the love he had rejected. Each memory was like a blow to his heart, and for the first time, he felt true remorse. When Jesus finally spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "You have lived a life of hatred, blinded by fear and ignorance," he said. "But hatred was never part of my plan for you. You were meant for so much more." The farmer tried to respond, but no words came. Tears streamed down his face as he stood in the presence of a love so pure and unconditional that it shattered every barrier he had built around his heart. Jesus continued, "I am giving you a chance. Not because you deserve it, but because my love for you is greater than your sins. Will you accept it?" In that moment, the farmer's hardened heart began to crack. The man who had spent a lifetime clinging to his prejudices, who had defined himself by his anger, felt something he had never felt before: hope. The farmer stood in awe, overwhelmed by the radiant presence before him. Jesus did not appear in the way he might have imagined from the depictions in churches or the paintings he had occasionally come across in books or on television. Instead, his appearance transcended human understanding. His features were luminous yet familiar, reflecting both an infinite majesty and an unshakable humanity. His eyes held a depth that seemed to reach into eternity, and his gaze pierced through the farmer's soul, laying bare every hidden part of him. For the first time in his life, the farmer felt truly seen. Not just the surface he presented to the world, but every thought, every action, every motive that had ever defined him. There was no hiding, no deflection, no justification. In that gaze, he felt completely exposed, yet he was not met with condemnation. What struck him most was the profound love radiating from Jesus, a love that seemed to envelop him entirely, even as it revealed the darkness within him. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. The farmer's mind raced with questions, doubts, and a growing sense of shame. How could someone as flawed, as hateful, as undeserving as he be standing in the presence of such pure holiness? Surely he was about to be cast away, punished for the lifetime of bitterness and harm he had inflicted on others. His fear grew, but so did an inexplicable sense of peace, as if the presence of Jesus itself was gently silencing his inner turmoil. When Jesus finally spoke, his voice was unlike anything the farmer had ever heard. It was not loud or commanding, yet it carried an authority that resonated deep within his very being. The voice was gentle, calm, and filled with compassion, yet it also carried an unshakable truth. It was a voice that left no room for excuses, only understanding. "You have been lost for so long," Jesus said, his words sinking into the farmer's heart like seeds planted in fertile soil. "You built walls of hatred and fear, believing they would protect you. But those walls became your prison, separating you from the love I had always intended for you to share." The farmer opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Instead, tears streamed down his face, tears born of a lifetime of regret, pain, and the realization of just how far he had strayed from the man he was meant to be. His knees buckled, and he fell to the ground before Jesus, unable to stand in the weight of his presence. He tried to look away, but Jesus reached out and gently touched his shoulder, lifting his gaze. "You were never alone," Jesus continued. "Even in your darkest moments, even when you turned away from me, I was with you. My love for you has never wavered. But you allowed the darkness in your heart to blind you to the truth." The farmer's mind was flooded with images of his life, each memory more vivid than the last. He saw himself as a child, playing in the fields with his siblings, his heart untainted by hatred. He saw his first experiences with prejudice, the ways it was taught to him by those he trusted, how it took root in his heart and grew over the years. He saw the moments when he had the opportunity to choose love and kindness, moments when he could have opened his heart to others, but instead chose fear and anger. Each memory was accompanied by a deep ache, a realization of what could have been if only he had chosen differently. Yet, for every moment of regret, there was also a glimmer of hope, a sense that it wasn't too late to change, to become the man he was meant to be. "Your hatred was not born of malice," Jesus said, as if reading his thoughts. "It was born of fear and ignorance, passed down through generations. But you were always capable of rising above it. That is why I have brought you here, to show you the truth and to give you a choice." The farmer finally found his voice, though it was shaky and weak. "Why me?" he asked, his words barely audible. "Why would you give someone like me a second chance?" Jesus smiled, and the warmth of that smile filled the farmer with a peace he had never known. "Because my love is not conditional," he said. "It is not reserved for the perfect or the righteous. It is for everyone, even those who have wandered farthest from me. Your sins are great, but my love is greater. All I ask is that you open your heart to it." The farmer's mind struggled to comprehend the magnitude of this love. He had spent his entire life believing that worth had to be earned, that forgiveness was something conditional, given only to those who deserved it. But here was Jesus, offering him a chance, not because he had earned it, but because it was freely given. As the farmer knelt before him, Jesus extended a hand and helped him to his feet. "I will show you what you need to see," he said. "But know this, the life you have lived is not the life I intended for you. There is still time to change, to make amends, and to share the love you have long withheld from others." With those words, Jesus gestured, and the world around them began to shift. The farmer felt as though he were being carried through time and space, as if he were both watching and experiencing the story of humanity itself. He saw scenes of people from every background, every race, every nation, working together in harmony, creating a world filled with love and understanding. But he also saw the consequences of hatred, division, and fear. The wars, the suffering, the missed opportunities for connection. Through it all, Jesus was by his side, guiding him, teaching him, and reminding him of the power of love and forgiveness. The farmer felt his heart begin to change, the walls he had built for so long starting to crumble. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to truly see others, to recognize their humanity, and to embrace them with compassion. As the vision faded, the farmer turned to Jesus, his voice steadier now. "What must I do?" he asked, ready to embrace the path that had been laid before him. Jesus placed a hand on his shoulder once more, his smile gentle yet resolute. "You will see," he said. "But first, you must return. There is much work to be done." The farmer felt a jolt as the vision surrounding him shifted once more. The light dimmed, and in its place, he found himself standing on a precipice overlooking a vast and unfamiliar landscape. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before, both beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Stretching out before him were scenes of a world that felt impossibly advanced, a place of shimmering cities, sprawling technologies, and boundless energy. Yet, alongside the splendor, he saw shadows creeping into the corners, reminders of a looming danger that came with this new age of humanity. Jesus stood beside him, his presence calm and steady, as if preparing the farmer for the truths he was about to witness. "Look closely," Jesus said, gesturing toward the vision below. "This is the future that humanity is building, but it is not without its perils." As the farmer watched, the vision began to move, scenes playing out as though he were witnessing history yet to unfold. He saw towering skyscrapers powered by clean, limitless energy. Machines worked tirelessly, creating homes, food, and resources for people around the globe. Diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries were eradicated, and advances in medicine allowed people to live longer, healthier lives. The farmer was awestruck. This is incredible," he whispered. He had never imagined such possibilities. In his lifetime, progress had always seemed slow, something distant and disconnected from his simple existence on the farm. But this was a world of miracles. Jesus nodded. "It is a vision of what could be. Humanity has been given the tools to create a better world. Technology is a gift, a reflection of the creativity and intelligence I have placed within you. But like all gifts, it comes with responsibility." The vision shifted, and the farmer's awe turned to unease. He saw the same technological marvels being used for darker purposes. Drones patrolled the skies, not for safety, but for control. Vast databases held the intimate details of every person's life, monitored and exploited by those in power. People became more isolated despite the connectivity of their devices, their relationships reduced to fleeting digital interactions. The same machines that had the potential to feed the hungry were also building weapons of unimaginable destruction. The farmer's heart sank as he watched. "Why would anyone do this?" he asked, his voice tinged with despair. "Why would they take something so good and use it to harm others?" Jesus turned to him, his expression both sorrowful and resolute. "It is not the tools themselves that are good or evil, but the hearts of those who wield them. Humanity stands at a crossroads. The choices made in this age will determine whether these gifts bring life or destruction. Fear, greed, and the desire for power have the ability to corrupt even the greatest advancements. The farmer felt the weight of those words. He had lived his own life ruled by fear and distrust, and he could see now how such feelings, magnified on a global scale, could lead to ruin. He turned back to the vision and saw further glimpses of the future. Great divides formed between those who controlled technology and those who were left behind. Entire populations were marginalized, their voices drowned out in a world that moved too quickly for them to catch up. The farmer recognized the echoes of his own life in these images, how he had shut others out, fearing change, clinging to the familiar even as it caused harm. But not all the images were bleak. In the midst of the turmoil, the farmer saw sparks of hope. Groups of people worked together to bridge the divides, using technology not as a weapon, but as a means of connection and healing. He saw communities coming together, guided by compassion and a shared vision of a better future. He saw the power of love overcoming fear, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Jesus spoke again, his voice carrying a profound urgency. The future is not set. It is shaped by the choices humanity makes each day. The path forward requires wisdom, humility, and above all, love. Without these, the greatest advancements will only bring greater suffering. The farmer turned to Jesus, his mind racing with questions. "What can I do?" he asked. "I'm just one person. How could I possibly make a difference in something so vast?" "You begin by changing your heart," Jesus replied. "The transformation within you will ripple outward, touching those around you. You may not be able to shape the future of technology, but you can shape the future of love and understanding in your own life. The choices you make, the way you treat others, the example you set, these are the seeds of change." The farmer nodded, though the enormity of the task felt overwhelming. He looked back at the vision and saw one last image, a world where humanity had learned to balance progress with compassion, where technology served as a bridge rather than a barrier, and where love guided every innovation. It was a glimpse of what could be, a reminder of the potential that lay within humanity if only it chose the right path. As the vision faded, the farmer felt a deep sense of both hope and responsibility. He realized that the future Jesus had shown him was not just a distant possibility, it was a call to action, a challenge for humanity to rise above its fears and divisions and create a world worthy of its potential. Turning to Jesus, he whispered, "I'll do whatever I can. I don't know how, but I'll try." Jesus placed a hand on his shoulder, his gaze filled with reassurance. "That is all I ask," he said. "Take what you have seen and share it. Help others to see the choices before them. Together, you can create a future filled with light." And with those words, the farmer felt a surge of determination. He did not fully understand what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain. He could no longer live as he had before. The path forward would require courage, humility, and a willingness to change, not just for himself, but for the world he was now called to help transform. The visions shifted again, and the farmer now stood in what appeared to be a vast, sprawling laboratory. The room was filled with machines unlike anything he had ever seen, sleek, futuristic devices that hummed with energy, their glowing interfaces pulsating with a life of their own. Large screens covered the walls, displaying complex calculations, schematics, and images of rockets soaring into the heavens. The farmer was both awestruck and overwhelmed by the sheer complexity of what surrounded him. As he tried to make sense of it all, Jesus spoke beside him. This is a glimpse of the work of one of the most influential figures of your time. His name is Elon Musk, and his vision for the future is as bold as it is precarious. The farmer's brow furrowed. Elon Musk? He repeated, the name foreign and unfamiliar to him. He had spent so much of his life disconnected from the wider world that the idea of someone shaping humanity's future on such a scale felt almost inconceivable. Who is he? Jesus gestured toward the screens, and the images shifted to show a man in his middle years, his expression intense and focused as he stood in front of a massive rocket. Scenes of bustling factories followed, with workers assembling electric cars, solar panels, and batteries. Then came images of satellites being launched into space, forming a network of light encircling the globe. The farmer watched, his confusion slowly giving way to understanding. Elon Musk is an innovator, a pioneer, Jesus said. He is driven by a desire to push the boundaries of what humanity believes is possible. His work spans many fields: space exploration, sustainable energy, artificial intelligence, and global connectivity. His vision is to create a future where humanity not only survives, but thrives. The farmer watched as the visions unfolded further. He saw massive colonies being built on Mars, their domes glinting under an alien sun. He saw highways filled with electric vehicles that moved silently. Without the choking fumes of traditional engines, he saw people in remote corners of the world accessing education and healthcare through the internet, beamed down from space. It was a world transformed, filled with possibilities the farmer had never dared to dream of. But the visions also carried a sense of unease. The screens flickered and the images changed. Now, the farmer saw the same technologies being used in ways that caused harm. He saw artificial intelligence systems making decisions that affected millions, their cold logic overriding human compassion. He saw wealth and power consolidating in the hands of a few, leaving many behind in a world that was supposed to be for everyone. He saw the void of space filled with debris, the remnants of humanity's relentless drive to expand and conquer. Elon Musk's work is both a gift and a warning, Jesus said. He is a man with great vision, but also a man who faces the same struggles as any other. His ambition, while remarkable, must be tempered with wisdom. The technologies he's helping to create are neither inherently good nor evil. They are tools. But how these tools are used will determine the fate of humanity. The farmer felt a knot form in his stomach as he watched the images unfold. He thought of the tractor that had nearly taken his life, how something so simple and practical had become a source of danger when misused. How much more dangerous, then, could these advanced technologies become if placed in the wrong hands? Why him? The farmer asked, his voice tinged with both curiosity and concern. Why is he so important? Jesus turned to him, his gaze steady and filled with understanding. Elon Musk represents the best and worst of humanity's potential. He is a man of vision, creativity, and determination, unafraid to challenge the status quo. But he's also a man who must grapple with the consequences of his actions, the weight of his influence, and the moral questions that arise from his work. His story is a mirror for humanity itself, reflecting the choices you all must make as you move into the future. The farmer nodded slowly, the weight of these revelations settling over him. He could see the truth in what Jesus was saying, that Elon Musk's work was a symbol of humanity's collective ambition, its drive to push beyond limits and achieve greatness. But with that ambition came responsibility, a responsibility that was often overlooked in the rush to innovate. "What can be done?" the farmer asked. "How do we make sure this doesn't go wrong?" Jesus' expression softened, and he placed a hand on the farmer's shoulder. "It begins with awareness," he said. "People like Elon Musk cannot carry the weight of the future alone. It is up to everyone to hold one another accountable, to ensure that progress is guided by compassion, wisdom, and a deep respect for all life. Technology is a reflection of the hearts and minds of those who create it. If humanity seeks to build a better world, it must first seek to build better hearts." The farmer looked back at the visions, seeing both the promise and the peril they represented. He thought of his own life, of the ways he had clung to fear and hatred instead of embracing love and understanding. He realized that the same lessons applied on a global scale. If humanity allowed itself to be ruled by greed, fear, and division, even the greatest advancements would lead to ruin. But if humanity chose love, collaboration, and humility, there was no limit to what could be achieved. As the visions faded, the farmer turned to Jesus, his heart heavy with both hope and responsibility. "What do I do with all of this?" he asked. "How can I make a difference in something so much bigger than myself?" "You start by sharing what you have seen," Jesus replied. "Tell others about the choices before them. Help them to understand the power they hold, not just in their inventions, but in their everyday actions. The future is not built by a single person. It is shaped by the collective choices of all." The farmer nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. He might not understand the intricacies of rockets or artificial intelligence, but he understood the importance of love, humility, and the responsibility each person had to one another. And with that understanding, he knew he could play his part in helping humanity choose the path of light. The farmer awoke with a gasp, his chest heaving as he drew in deep, frantic breaths. The cold, hard ground beneath him and the familiar scent of soil confirmed that he was back on his farm. The weight of the tractor was gone, though he could still feel a dull ache in his body, as if a reminder of how close he had come to death. For a moment, he lay there in silence, the vivid memories of his encounter with Jesus flooding his mind. Every word, every vision, every truth he had revealed remained sharp and clear. Slowly, the farmer pushed himself up, his hands trembling. He looked around at his surroundings, the same fields and fences he had tended for decades. But everything felt different now. The world seemed brighter, more alive. The sunlight streaming through the trees carried a warmth that he had never noticed before. The chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves in the wind, the distant hum of insects. All of it seemed to sing with a purpose he had never understood until now. But along with this newfound sense of wonder came a heavy weight of responsibility. Jesus' words echoed in his mind. "The life you have lived is not the life I intended for you." He felt the sting of those words, the deep regret of a life spent in anger and isolation. Yet he also felt something else: hope. Jesus had given him a second chance, not because he deserved it, but because of a love greater than he could comprehend. That love called him to action, to share what he had seen and to live in a way that reflected the truth he now understood. The first step, he realized, was to make amends. He thought of the people he had wronged over the years, the neighbors he had shunned, the workers he had driven away with his harsh words, the family members he had pushed out of his life. Each face came to mind, bringing with it a pang of guilt. He knew that seeking forgiveness would not be easy, but it was necessary. Jesus had shown him the power of love and reconciliation, and now it was his turn to act on that lesson. The farmer's first visit was to his sister, whom he had not spoken to in over a decade. Their falling out had been over something trivial, a disagreement about the family farm after their parents' passing, but it had festered into a wound neither of them had sought to heal. Standing on her porch, his hands shaking, he hesitated before finally knocking on the door. When she opened it, her expression was a mix of surprise and caution. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her tone guarded. The farmer looked down, his voice trembling. "I came to say I'm sorry," he said. "I've been wrong about a lot of things, but most of all about how I treated you. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to tell you that I'm sorry." For a moment, she said nothing. Then her expression softened, and tears welled in her eyes. "It's been so long," she whispered. "I've missed you." The two embraced, and for the first time in years, the farmer felt the warmth of family. It was a small step, but it was the beginning of a journey toward healing. Over the weeks that followed, the farmer reached out to others he had wronged. He apologized to the workers who had left his farm, some of whom greeted him with skepticism, others with cautious forgiveness. He visited his neighbors, offering his time and labor to help with their needs, actions that spoke louder than words. Slowly but surely, he began to rebuild the bridges he had burned, finding that each act of kindness brought him a sense of peace he had never known. But making amends was only part of his new purpose. He knew that the message he had received from Jesus was not meant for him alone. The visions of humanity's future, the warnings about technology, and the lessons about love and compassion. These were truths that needed to be shared. He began to write down everything he had seen and heard, filling notebooks with detailed accounts of his experience. At first, he kept these writings to himself, unsure of how to share them. But as he continued to reflect, he realized that he could no longer remain silent. One Sunday morning, the farmer attended a church service in town, a rare occurrence for a man who had long distanced himself from any kind of community. As he listened to the sermon, he felt a stirring in his heart. When the pastor invited anyone to come forward and share a testimony, the farmer hesitated, his nerves threatening to get the better of him. But then he remembered Jesus' words, "Take what you have seen and share it." Slowly, he rose from his seat and walked to the front of the congregation. The room grew quiet as he began to speak. "I don't know how to explain what I've been through," he said, his voice trembling. "But I had an experience, one that changed everything. I saw Jesus. He showed me the life I've lived, and it wasn't a good one. He showed me what I've done wrong, but he also gave me a second chance. He gave me a message, and I need to share it." The congregation listened in rapt silence as the farmer recounted his journey, his encounter with Jesus, and the visions of humanity's future. He spoke of the importance of love and forgiveness, the dangers of allowing fear and hatred to rule one's heart, and the responsibility humanity had to use its gifts wisely. When he finished, the room was filled with a profound stillness, as if everyone present was reflecting on their own lives. From that day forward, the farmer became a voice of hope and transformation in his community. He shared his story wherever he could, in churches, schools, community centers, and even online, where his tale began to reach people far beyond the boundaries of his small town. Some doubted him, others dismissed him, but many were moved by his sincerity and the depth of his message. He did not claim to have all the answers, but he spoke from the heart, urging others to choose love, understanding, and compassion in their lives. As the years went on, the farmer saw the ripple effects of his actions, Relationships were mended, prejudices were challenged, and his small community began to change. He knew that his work was only a tiny piece of the larger puzzle, but he also knew that every act of kindness, every moment of understanding contributed to the brighter future Jesus had shown him. Though the farmer had once lived a life defined by hatred and isolation, he now found himself surrounded by love and connection. And as he looked out over the fields of his farm, he realized that his second chance had not only saved his life, it had given it meaning.